afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are really glad to have the Milkman, Mr. Loy, the familiar voice from the breakfast grill, Mr. Chuang, and also Ruzi with us here today. And any Q&A and questions you have, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A or chat box or the FB box that we have there. And without further delay, let me just pass the floor to Ruzi and get the event started.
Thank you, Chime. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our CGS-CIMB Thoughts Leadership Series. Thoughts is a social platform for prominent individuals to share their wealth of experience to inspire young, upcoming, and talent within the industry, to impart and share their experience and journey, leadership, wisdom, and how to navigate through the challenging times. As Mark Twain, the American writer, once said, "The secret of getting ahead is getting started." On that note, our man of the hour, Mr. Loy, the founder of Farm Fresh, is a testament of this. He has successfully revitalized Malaysia's dairy industry since 2008, consequently making Farm Fresh brand the market leader in all natural and fresh dairy products in Malaysia. Mr. Loy and his cow have earned the love of all Malaysians. Mr. Loy has demonstrated that innovation and willingness to take the risk can lead to operational excellence and business success. Today, we will be looking into the mind behind the whole operation to understand how the business has elevated so well, what is the inspiration and vision behind it, how as an individual can we apply the same mindset and strategy to be just as successful in our endeavors. We are honored to have with us the great Mr. Loy to tell the story. Together with him is Chuang from BFM, who will be moderating the session. For your information, Mr. Loy, the audience with us today are the investing community within CGS-CIMB clientele, the youth of the financial industry, and university students. We present to you the one and only Mr. Loy in today's session of Milkman and his cash cow. Over to you, Chuang.
Thanks so much, Ruzi. Hi, Mr. Loy. I've been asked by Mr. Loy himself to actually call him Loy, such as he is of a humble nature. Loy, if we can start at the start where all good stories begin, okay? I understand from my research and the reading that you actually come from agricultural beginnings. You're the child of apparently a farmer and a rubber tapper, and you grew up in a small farm in Ipoh, in fact, in Perak. Can you tell me about those days, back in those days when you were, back on the farm, and how that shaped you as an individual?
Yeah, thank you for having me, guys. Yeah, I think, like you rightly pointed out, I come from a small village in Perak. I was Tuan. And my parents actually has always been farmers that we owns some rubber plantation, a few acres of rubber plantation. And my dad used to grow tapioca and things like that. So I think even my very childhood days, I used to go to the rubber farm to help out my dad and things like that. And then people used to grow the tapioca and things. So agriculture wasn't something that is new to me. So I think it is something that I grew up with. And then I move on to do something else. And the last 10 over years, I finally go back to what I felt that, it's where I belong, and I enjoy doing it actually.
Yeah, you actually apparently, Loy, you went to work in a packaging company. Then I also read that you worked in some kind of automotive workshop. Obviously, maybe you're trying your hand at different things, but you felt the need to go back, not just to agriculture, but to entrepreneurship as well. Were you born an entrepreneur, or do you think that you somehow fell into it by accident?
I think this is an interesting, question, because I remember when I was young, somehow rather I like to trade, I like to trade even when I was young boy. So I'm not sure whether this is inborn or you actually accumulate it over the years. So even when I was young boy, I think I like to do trade and things like that. And so what happened is that when I left school, I came down to Johor. I think 1981. That was 30 years ago, 30 over years ago. So I came down here. So I started my career, I think, in a palm oil mill as a trainee supervisor, whereby I move around from one section of the oil mill to another section. The one thing that impressed me was that on my last rotation, I was in a store, in charge of store. So you get this salesman coming in, very nice tie, and I look at them, I say, hey, this is a much better job and better profession, right? Than the squat inside this palm oil mill, Hitam, literally the air is hitam, because it's right in Johor. So I told my friend, I said, hey, can you find me a job in Johor Bahru? So, and then reluctantly, he actually, introduced me a job as a sales in Johor Bahru. That's how I actually started to do some automotive parts, whereby I sell batteries, car compressors, and things like that for a good 2 years before I actually moved on to work for my former boss, the Tan family. I happened to be his I rented a room from him actually. So he saw me working very hard, and I got in a top salesman award from Singapore. He said, "Hey, Roy, why are you working so hard for people? And then why don't you try to do something on your own?" So that's how I actually started a company. He actually started a company that I followed the family, and then without looking back, I worked for the family for 20 long years, and from there, actually, packaging has become a main business of our company until I think 2003 we listed on Bursa, and then 2005 we migrated to main board. And that was the time I sort of like decided, wow, long years working for the family is long enough already. It's time to move on. And I have the opportunity to liquidate my small investment and use that money to go into agri actually. Yeah.
Yeah, so now is your time, because so the stories go, it's your time to list on the share market this year. But apparently I've been told not to ask you about it, so we cannot talk about it today. But what we can talk about is the journey, okay? And when you did all those years with the family, the Tan family, 20 over years, you saw how they ran their business. You also saw how your parents ran their own little farm in Johor, in Perak, right? What were your entrepreneurial core values? What values do you hold most dear to your heart when you started your own business?
I think while I was with the Tan family, the one thing that I think my parents and taught me well, I think a person integrity is very important. You need to have that, for people to trust you. You need to have that in order for people come and do the dealing with you, because words are very important. Yeah. So I think that's what I managed to work for the Tan family for 20 long years. But it's, after all, it's still a family company. So that part of it, I find it a little bit challenge for me to manage, because you have the company interest and then you have the families, you have the nephews, the nieces, sisters, for example. So I find that, sometimes too close a family business, I think it's hard to, it's not so much a marriage anymore. It's a bit difficult to manage. That was primarily also one of the considerations I felt that if you want the company to grow beyond, and you wanted to compete with the big companies and things, you got to be the best, yeah. So I think that's what I learned from my first 20 years of the working experience. And what actually prompted me to move on was that I feel that at the point of time, packaging, in the early days, packaging was quite a good business. You remember the television set was so big, and the mini compo was huge, and things. So packaging demands are very, very strong. And until the late 90s or early 2000, I think Malaysian cost structure wasn't quite right. A lot of people actually start moving out, so it created a lot of vacuum in that market. So I find that it's not very hard to sustain the business, because you keep on losing your important customer, and just not because of your fault, but because they relocated to other part of the world, let's say to China or to Vietnam, for example. So, and what led me to think that probably it's time to throw in my towel and move on. And then I wanted to do something that a bit agriculture related, something to do with food, for example, that it's a bit more evergreen, more sustainable and more resilient. So I think that it was one of the very big steps that I actually take to move on. At the point of time, I was 40 odd years old. In the packaging company as a deputy MD, I'm quite well paid, very comfortable business that I know very well. And now you wanted to quit and start something completely new. Some of my friends think I'm having a midlife crisis or what. I'm moving on like that. Yeah.
That must have been very hard for you, Loy, because 40-something years old, I'm sure you have already responsibilities, whether it's a family or mortgage or whatever. The salary must be also very interesting. The listed status also must be interesting from the shares, right? How difficult of a decision was it for you to actually resign and start?
Yeah, there's a lot of the thoughts gone through. I've given a lot of thoughts. But I think the sense of convictions that I feel that, I was really feel that I wanted to go back to the agri-business that I intended to do. And I also strongly believe that, this is a business that perhaps to start fresh and new would be a challenge. But I thought, if you overcome that, then you are enrolled to build something that is very, very resilient and very sustainable. So that was actually sort of like, I still charging ahead despite some reservations and comment from my family, for example. Yeah.
What was your biggest fear at the time, before you started?
The earlier years, I think even goes back to the hosting milk company. The first couple of years, it was really, really far more difficult than I sort of predicted. I thought, hard works and the kind of thing that you can actually overcome that. But the first 1 or 2 years is really, really burning. We lose money, cash burn rate was quite high and things like that. And I at some point almost, I felt, hey, Kaloy, are you making a right decision or not? It reaches that kind of point. It's quite discouraging because to run the dairy farm itself is already a problem. It's very, very challenging because, for me, the learning curve is very, very steep. Yeah. It's coming from ground zero. And then when you produce the milk, you realize that you need to, go to the supermarket and sell them again. Then when you reach there, you realize that, gosh, your competitors are 30, 50 years national brand down there. We have a lot of marketing resources and things that you're up against these people. So can we make it or not? I'm not sure. So I think the early stage was there's a lot of doubts, there's a lot of reservation. But I think what actually keep us going at the point of time was Chuan is that on weekend I would go to the supermarket, become a promoter. I used to go to and sometimes I come back from Kota Tinggi farm. I will stop in Ayong Tebrau to become a promoter for an hour or two. So I think the interactions of that with the customer, and after a few weeks, a month, you realize that it's the same customer coming back to take your milk. They love the milk taste. They love that. I think is sort of like, I knew then we had the right product. Malaysia, not many people realize that, the chill milk on the chill section vis-a-vis our fresh milk is actually a very different product. So one is made from milk powder, the other one from fresh milk. So I think when they begin to appreciate what we actually produce, then I realized that this is just a matter of time. That we will reach there. So that kind of customer will be coming back to tell you that, wow, my kids love your milk. It gives you a lot of encouragement too. Even though you feel that back in the farm is very tough, we send milk using polyform into the bus express to send all the way to KL, and ASB, they all will collect in KL and things like that. Can you imagine, 200 liters of milk, if you send by chill truck to KL, you probably not enough cost to recover your toll and your diesel cost, So I think that is where that despite all that, we still move on, yeah.
Yeah, I actually, before you even got to the whole challenge of logistics, right? Even before Azmi came on board, and we'll talk about Azmi as well. You actually didn't start in dairy. You started in dragon fruit. You started by breeding arowana. You, I think, hired 15 people. You bought something like a few dozen acres of land in Kota Tinggi. That must have been tough. You must have borrowed money. How difficult was the money situation in those days? How difficult was the people situation in those days? And this is even before dairy.
Now, I think when I first left the company, we owned our family bought 27 acres of land in Kota Tinggi, Mawai. That's where we actually started to do some dragon fruits. You know, we raised some fish, and subsequently we actually move on to actually raise some goat because there's a lot of waste from the farm and things like that. So I think the early years to borrow money in agriculture, in particular relating to livestock, I think is very, very difficult because a lot of banks are very reserved. You know, if you borrow money to fund an oil palm plantation, for example, those kind of funding probably is a lot more easier to come. Maybe if you go into poultry, that those are established one, I think it's easier. But to go into goat and then subsequently into the dairy cow, I think that is something that is very, very tough, you know, in terms of you wanted to borrow. So, and then when we started with the goats business, we realized that, you know, that the logistic of moving that, you know, you see goat's milk, they are good, but they're expensive as well. It's very, very niche. So when you got a customer that order a few boxes in Segamat, for example, or in or how do you send to them? The logistic itself is a nightmare. So we realized that, you know, that logistic will continue posing a problem to us despite the fact that we reach out to supermarket and all this. So to do dairy, fortunately at the point of time, I think there's another plot of land available nearby our site. So there's about 480 acres of plot of land available. So we bought the land. And that is where we actually started to move into the dairy cow because you need to have the land bank. If you don't have land bank, you want to do dairy, both probably easier, but not the dairy cow. So that is where I think we move into the second phase of, at that point of time, I think my mind was quite set already. I wanted to focus on dairy already. So, and then what we did is that Bukit Merah has got this arowana rush, you know. So I take the opportunity to liquidate all those fishes and things, and then divert the money and everything, focus on the dairy side.
Yeah, so from a business perspective, Loy, a lot of people do rear arowana in this country. A lot of people do rear goat in this country, but very few people rear cows, especially dairy cows, especially since it's so hot here in tropical Malaysia. What are the business conditions that give you the frame of mind that this is a sustainable business, in fact, a superior business in sustainability from, say, packaging?
Yeah, I think, okay, now, for when we produce goat's milk, we realize that, you know, this dairy industry is something that quite niche when you comes to fresh category. There isn't much comparison, so to speak, you know. So when we wanted to do dairy cow, of course, I think, to be honest, at the point of time, all I know I want to do dairy cow, to do cow's milk. I didn't know how difficult would that be, but I knew that, you know, if you have to build, you overcome those things. One thing that, you know, if you look at a company name, the Hosting Milk Company, for example, I was naive enough to even put my company name as Hosting there. The black and white cow give you a lot of milk. So I'm just like another ordinary, any other farmers that you want a cow that give you more milk. Every farmer wanted that. So I thought, yeah, you know, this black and white cow looks lovely, name nice. So we named our company after Hosting Milk Company. But by the time when I go in, I only realized that, gosh, you know, this is not easy, you know, because, you know, these are temperate cows. They thrive in Australia, they thrive in Europe. But when they come here, you know, it's going to be a struggle because they're very hot and very humid. So I began to realize that, hey, you know, looks like if I don't get this right, it's going to be hard for me to grow as well. So that led me to search for genetic breeds that leading up that I have the opportunity to acquire this AFS breed, which is the we call it the Australian Friesian Sahiwal in Australia. So I went there, I bought some of the cow back, and then use that breed to actually to grow our business. So after a year, I think about a year later, the owner actually came and talked to me and said, would you want to have this genetic or not? Why don't I sell you the company? So Steve was actually moving to Mexico. So I said, you sure you want to partner genetic? In fact, that was developed by the Queensland government way back in the 60s and 70s. So in less than 1 or 2 months, I actually cut the deal with him, bought over the company. But I bought over with my partners in Australia. Adam actually became a partner in Australia because I realized that it's hard for me to build a base in Australia without the local partners there.
I see, I see. Okay, let's just take a little sidestep here and talk about the risks, okay? Because cows are animals, and animals are prone to illnesses like we are. You know, we are, of course, living through COVID and all these things. And in the last 20 years, we've had SARS and avian flu and all kinds of, MERS and all that kind of thing. How do you protect against these things? What kind of strategies do you employ?
I think the livestock business, like any other livestock, there will always be a risk. So I think in our case, we begin by importing at least a good dairy animal from Australia to begin with. They are disease-free country, for example. So we brought them in here. And then next thing is that we have to ensure how do we protect them in the sense that, we don't want them to get infected with unnecessary disease. So in our farm, for example, the basic biosecurities are important. That's why, over the years, there's so many people wanted to visit us. We don't really open up for that reason also because we do not want to bring unnecessary guests to the farm as well. So the only thing is that Malaysia, unfortunately, we are connected to Thailand, Myanmar, and all the way up to China. FMD has never been free in this part of the world. So every year we have to be very careful. So, but of course, I think the way to prevent it is to do vaccination, to vaccine them. And once they arrive, we give them 2 jabs. And then subsequently, every 6 months, we actually give them a booster jab as well. So what happened is that usually we will be particularly tighten up our biosecurity when it comes to, like for example, next month, the Ramadan month, Hari Raya or Hari Raya Haji, whereby there's a lot of cow movement. And then some of them actually coming in from Thailand, for example. So those are the period that we have to be extra vigilant in the sense that to make sure that we are not going to bring in the unnecessary outbreak to our farm. But thank God, over the last 10 years, we haven't had any outbreak.
Yeah, so around about this time, when you transitioned into cows and dairy, Loy, you called an old friend of yours, a gentleman named Azmi Zainal, okay? And so the story goes, he helped you relieve the burden of your business. He helped with things like logistics. He helped with things like sales. And to some degree, apparently, reportedly, he helped you also start talking to Kasana National. And Kasana National bought a stake in the business way, way back in that time. What happened then?
Actually, Azmi is an old friend of mine. I think he's actually from my former company. The packaging company. So we were actually, I know Azmi since then already. So when I left the company, I think about a year later, Azmi also left the company. So Azmi actually went to join Felda, and he had spent 2 or 3 years down there, and then eventually he came back to actually help me when I needed the help. So I think that's how, at that point of time, Kazana already came in already. Yeah, Kazana already came in. So I was also about the time to scale. That's where actually Azmi come in the role. And we were still very small at that point of time. Azmi had a lot of resentment to me when I asked him to become a promoter in Maidin. I said, I am a promoter in Aeon and Giant on the weekend. You become a promoter at Maidin, So he said, I'm the only one with jump code and then become a promoter, all the other girls and things like that. So that's how we actually started. I told him, I said, just interact with the customer, get the feedback back, and then we see how it goes. So in the evening, we will speak over the phone almost every other day, just to get an update. So both of us get very encouraged when we see that banyak customer yang serupa datang balik, So I think that is where really keep us very, very motivated. Yeah.
Yeah, of course, short of you both wearing miniskirts like Richard Branson did on his aeroplane. But, rewind to Kasana, right? When Kasana bought a reported 30% stake in the business, on what basis did they buy that 30%? What was the potential that they saw?
I think at the point of time, what happened is that the government also promoted agriculture as a business, right? So I think that was the time that whereby Kasana felt that they also need to do some uh, national building, so to speak, to play their role, to identify entrepreneur and invest in them in those industry that the government that wanted to promote. So we were among one of the few seeds that they sown in the early years, that agriculture investment that they have invested in us. And thank God, so I'm very fortunate to be able to have Kasana as my partners. So they play a lot of role in helping me over the years, besides providing the capital for us to grow, in terms of the governance, in terms of guidance and things like that. So I think very much keeping us at toe as well. So I think that's how that the whole Kasana thing comes in, during the time government actually promoting the industry. Although our investment is, to Kasana is, I not even lose change. It's such a small investment. So, but they still attend to us. They still devote their time to us, and things like. So I think that really, really makes the difference.
Well, not in 2021 with your valuation going to be where it is. But again, we can't talk about that. So, back in those days, Asmi and you, right? And I read that Asmi would be waiting at the Sungai Besi toll to intercept the buses that you used to hire to deliver your milk to the city. You couldn't afford trucks. You couldn't afford lorries, apparently. Tell me about those days.
Yeah, and this is where, the early, when I tell you, it's so demoralizing, and it's like literally wear you down. So we literally know all the bus driver in Takin bus station, So they have 10 polyform box, 8 polyform box, for example, and then Azmi will pick it up and Sungai Besito. And then we rent an office. It's actually a house in Bana somewhere there or whatever it is. So and put it into the chiller, and then start to move on to sell. So the early years, because if you have only 200 liters, because when our farm started, our productions are very small, yeah. So it's very hard to actually send it out to KL using a chill truck. So this is why we started using that. And KL is a market you cannot ignore. It's where the main market is. So the first few months was a bit miserable. Leading to eventually we can have our own maiden trip of our own chill truck going all the way down. And even then, the early years when we buy the milk from farmers as well, we use the milk churn. I got some picture of the 25, 30 liters milk churn. We could have like hundreds of them to go and collect milk from the farmers in the early days.
So I'm sure it will all have taken in gradual steps. And those days must have been so hard for you, Loy. At what point was the inflection achieved? When the supermarket started to buy from you, they started to trust your brand, customers started to know and acknowledge and trust your brand. It's not cheap, but you pay for the quality. But that difficult obstacle in those days must have been very hard. When was that period? When did you know that you were going to be able to afford your own, supply chain?
I think that's where when Kasana comes in, the new injection of Kasana, that actually start to a bit of game changing. First, we are able to build a bigger shed. We're able to bring in, like 500 cows rather than 60 cow or 80 cow, for example. So that is where I think we start to scale already. And we realize that over the months, we realize that we are constantly chasing demand. That means the demand is always ahead of what we can actually produce. And that is very, very comforting because you realize that the demand for your product through word of mouth, we didn't spend any money on advertisement. We don't do any sort of TVC ads or whatever it is, but through word of mouth, that the demand for our product is growing. So that's how we actually start to scale. We start to invest into a bigger plant, bigger processing factory, and then having multiple trucks to start to do our own distribution.
Yeah, so when Kazana came in, right, Loy, and Kazana is Kazana. Kazana is no small drop in the ocean. They're the big boys, right? When they came in, what were you thinking? Did you think to yourself, what is going on here? There's something miraculously happening. What do they see in me? What do you think they saw in you? Was it you, the person, or was it the business? And definitely maybe both, but which is the most important thing for them when they analyze an investment? What's your opinion?
I think their own Kazana in-house, probably their own research, could have pointed out to them as well. You know, this is going to be a important industry and it's growing. And the reasons that, you know, there is market demand. We all know that, you know, the consumer want fresher product, the consumer wants something that is more natural, all right? So, but then again, who can provide that supply? So it is that gap that they probably see, you know, there is a demand, but the supply has never really been there. So if we look back in the past, our government have tried to grow this dairy industry for the last 30, 40 years. You know, they brought in so many cows over the years and give it to the farmers. They all drop it. They bring it again. They give it to the farmer. They drop it again. So it's because it's not the right breed, right? So that what happened is that after many years, the industry never grew. But again, I think to some extent, you know, the multinational company down here that actually buys the milk from our farmer, which is also, I don't think so, have paying our farmers a fair price. In the first place, they benchmark the international milk powder price, blended to make into a liter, and they use that price to actually benchmark it and offer to our dairy farmer. How can you survive? You can never survive with that kind of pricing, you see. So the one that survive are those Indians, some Bengali and all this kind of thing who actually continue to keep it for a religion belief, for example. They don't mind, they don't make money, but they keep that. But if you want to go in there to take dairy as a business, you then realize that there is no money in there, and people just fizzle off, you see. So as a foreign national company, I would be better off to buy milk powder and blend it and supply to all the Malaysians. Nobody complain, who cares? Why should I pay more to help your farmers to get your fresh milk, and then I am not actually better off? So why would I want to promote that, right?
Yeah, but powdered milk is nowhere near as nice or as nutritious as you know, natural dairy milk, which is what you're producing. I got a question, Loy, from a gentleman named Andrew Yao. And again, I just want to ask everybody that's in the room today to just, if you want to ask any questions, please, you can do so anytime. Put it into the Q&A. We'll try and read it all out. Andrew is asking you, and this is a very pertinent question, Loy. What are some examples of the other companies or experts who helped bring you to where you are today? And the critical technologies that are important to raising basically these healthy and productive cows in the Malaysian climate, which is what you're talking about earlier.
So I think in terms of advisors that when we actually go into this industry, sadly what happened it was that I brought in you know, the nutritionists from Australia. I brought in, you know, friends from New Zealand and all this sort of thing to give us the advice, for example. Or I even traveled to US, you know, to try to understand the dairy. Unfortunately, most of those things that been taught to us is not quite applicable to our part of the world. It's not that it's not a good advice, all right? The advice is only applicable in the context that if you were to raise the dairy cow in the temperate animal, in the temperate. But when you come here, it's totally a different ball game already. So sometimes, you know, except some equipment, yeah, you can go for the better equipment in the sense that the technologies that improve. You can go on to the kind of like our rotary milking stations, you know, and all this sort of thing, and computerized RFID tags and all. Those are the things that, of course, you can get advice from all the professionals that make your animal husbandry a lot easier. Can you imagine when you got a few thousand cows, and if you are not computerized, you can't possibly know each cow. What is their age, what is their records and their milking records. So all this have to be computerized into our cloud platform in order for us to call up the cow ID. It's just like a doctor, you know, you go there, there's a cut for you, and then they'll see, oh, whatever it is. So all this, I think technology help. Unfortunately, you cannot find good advice with regards to tropical dairy farming. How do you like cows are very, very, our cows are, if a temperate cow, even if you're bitten by a tick, you develop anaplasmosis. You know, it's a blood parasite. It's just a human being be bitten by malaria at this mosquito. You develop malaria. If you're not careful, you die. So the same thing. The cow only got 4 days window. If you miss that, she will be gone. So these are the things that, you know, only the local knowledge will actually help you, rather than, you know, this kind of overseas advisors. Yeah.
Yeah, so of course cows have feelings as well, right? They got to be happy and chilled out and in a good frame of mind to produce good milk, okay? How do you make sure that your cows are healthy, right? And I also want to draw a parallel to other players like Etika and Dutch Lady. And this is related to the question from Chin Chin Yi as well. Chin Chin Yi, one of our participants. How do you keep your cows healthy? And basically, how do you compete with the big boys like Dutch Lady?
Well, I think keeping our cow happy is not that difficult. I think in our farm at the very early stage, all our employees are very well aware that that we pay great attention to the well-being of our dairy animal. I used to fondly call them ladies and girls, for example. So I think that is very very important. A happy cow, without question, will produce a good quality milk. So imagine a cow that is sick, the cow is not well. How can the milk be yummy? So I think that is a very very basic thing. So I think in our farm, a lot of efforts to make put in ensures that I used to joke with the Jacob, whatever that the TMR that we blend to feed our cow is like a nasi biryani. Make sure that they're nice. And so to me, when I walk around the farm, my eyes are very sensitive to feed refusal. If usually you should like to see them, that you prepare a nice meal for them, they all zoom down, they polish off, they look nice. But when you see there is a refusal, it is either the feed is not well prepared, for example, or the grass are getting too old. Sometimes our girls can be very picky as well. If you send them grass that is very old, they might not want to eat it and things like that. So certain season of the year we might have the problem. For example, when you have droughts and things like that. So I think that is very important. Now, coming back to our competitor, guys like Dash Lady, for example, they know dairy in and out. They are the largest co-ops, in Holland. I mean, if you talk about raising dairy cow, I mean, they are probably second to none. But why are they not? And they still have the money. They have all the resources. Why are they not raising one single cow in Malaysia? I think that is a very interesting question, isn't it? Because you have the knowledge, you have the money, you have the means, but why are you not raising a single cow in Malaysia despite the fact that you've been here for 30, 40 years? So there must be a problem that they see, they can't solve, which is the tropical climax. That, if they brought in a cow in Holland, give them 35 liters, when they come here, maybe give them 10 liters. So, a simple mathematics will tell you, hey, forget about it, don't waste time,
But not as fresh, lah, and not as delicious. Right?
Yeah,
Is that
yeah.
true? I mean, so yeah, because obviously there's a business reason why Dutch Lady don't do that. Is that an advantage or is that a disadvantage?
I think let's say if you don't have competitors like Farm Fresh, probably there's no different for them. As I say that, for decades they've been producing dairy product using powdered milk, and then all the Malaysian happily zombing down with no complaint. So, and they make better money out of it as well. So why should I be bothered with to raise dairy cow, which is difficult and the economy don't really stacks up and things like that. So until when we come, I think probably because of that, the landscape start to change. You have one company that are truly integrated, expanding farm after farm after farm. Today we got 5 farms already, right? So we must have done something right for us to grow that way. And obviously, the Malaysian consumer also getting more learned, have more discerning. They opt for a better product. So I think today, probably, I see, our company will continue to grow to meet the growing demand. Yeah.
Okay, so in terms of expansion, and this relates to questions that are coming in from people like Eugene and basically Sunny Chu, okay? In terms of expansion, now it sounds as if not many players are basically rearing cows in Malaysia. As you say, Dutch Lady doesn't have any cows in Malaysia. And assuming that you are looking beyond Malaysia as a larger market within ASEAN, and don't talk about Australia because Australia, as you say, a lot of farmers, a lot of producers there. So it's a quite a crowded market. What is the next play for you? Is it sideways into UHT milk? Is it sideways into other agricultural products, whether it's chocolate, for example? What is the game plan?
I think having what we learned, the dairy farming in Malaysia here, as in the tropical context, I think in the coming years, if there's any opportunity to emulate or rather duplicate what we learned here to places like, for example, Indonesia, or even into places like Philippines, for example, world obviously give us the advantage. And moreover, our Australian dairy cow farm are also served. It's a very strategic investment for us. We need to have a dairy farm there to assess the genetic that we wanted. And although in Malaysia, I can't send the heifers from Malaysia to Indonesia or to Philippines, for example, because we are not a FMD-free country. But we can always use the base in Australia to actually move all our heifers. If let's say we decided to have a small farm in Indonesia with 1,000 or 500 cows, Australia can serve that base to actually move the dairy cow for us to grow in there. So I think if at all in the future, if we were to grow to the regional market, Cambodia, for example, as the country get more affluent, for example, I think we have the advantage because of the knowledge that we have gained down here.
Okay, so what is the cost structure? You talked about how the Dutch producers might get 35 liters per cow, I think give or take, right? What is your output per cow in Malaysia? And I think specifically your cost structure. And again, this is a question from Chin Yi.
Now, I think in terms of cost structure, for example, we have two farms. We have farm in Malaysia, and then we have farm in Australia as well. So the same cow in Australia, for example, give us 35 liters in Australia. If you brought them back, same genetic, you'll be happy if she can give you 15 liters, right? So it's almost half. It's almost like half of what they can get back in Australia. Now, the only difference here is that, Tuan, the milk price in Australia is only about, say, about $1.50 a liter, right? 50 cents a liter, which translates to about 1 ringgit and 50 cents. Here in Malaysia, it's almost 3 ringgit. So you produce half the volume, but you got double the value. So from an economic standpoint, it is still worthwhile in a sense that because you have a higher selling price in Malaysia vis-a-vis, in Australia, because you produce more, but your milk price is also lower as well. So I think that kind of equation somehow rather, it ties back as well.
What about margins and basically defensible margins? I don't know how much we can talk about that, but maybe any kind of viewpoint would be useful.
I think in terms of margin, we have fairly healthy margin. We have not increased our milk price for the last 3-4 years already. We hold it, we maintain at the price, for almost, I think this is the 4th year already. So, but notwithstanding that, I think over the years, we also realized that our margin is also enhanced, so to speak. Right, it's actually improving. I think this is also ties back to in terms of the scale that we go. We are able to buy better, for example, and then in terms of our knowledge that we have learned, we have less wastages, for example, and then the volume also grow. And we are not a very. I think our companies are quite lean, right? In a sense, our overhead cost doesn't really go in tandem, or rather our overhead cost run ahead of our sales growth, for example. So in this case, our sales actually grow far faster than our overhead cost. So overall, I think we still see the improvement on our numbers here.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I also find it fascinating that you're going to raise capital, in fact, months, not even a year, but months after essentially the worst disaster in over 100 years when Malaysia and the world is concerned. What kind of lessons did you learn from COVID-19, Loy? And, how do you handle those issues?
Now, I think, thank God, I think this is something that the first week when we had this lockdown announcement, I think we are to some extent, we don't know what to expect. We will actually panic as well because being fresh milk company, everything is so perishable and you don't have the luxury to shut down your plant and wait and see and things like that. And our cow back in the farm is every day will give you the same amount. The milk continue to flow regardless. Yeah. So what we realized that suddenly we see a HoReCa market because we were quite we supplied quite a fair bit into the HoReCa market, meaning that all the cafe using our milk, all the boba teas, the kind of category, they are all using our milk. So we had about, I think, 4-5 million ringgit business in that space, and suddenly they all dropped it. They just closed down, and then what are you going to do? So what we realized, oh gosh, we're going to have a surplus of milk in this case. and then the suppliers who can operate, who cannot operate. It's quite chaotic, the first week. So we start to run our plant. Suddenly we realize that we are essential. We can continue to run, but our label guy cannot run. Our bottle supplier cannot run. Our box supplier. So without them feeding into our system, our plant cannot run as well. So that's where we quickly seek MITI to help us to get our component supplier to be accredited as essential as well in order to supply to us. So by the 40-week things start to normalize, and then at least we see a better way. By then, what we realized that the in-home consumption increased so markedly that the supermarket order actually started coming in a big scale. So what we loses on the HoReCa market is actually well compensated in the in-house consumption. So I think net throughout the whole, I think we were looking at our 2019 numbers and our 2020 numbers. We still grew 60-70% for that year. So I think it's amazing how God has blessed us.
Yeah. Okay. Now, is it true to say that your supply chain is a more resilient one now that you're in 2021, having done all the accreditation and certification from 2020?
I beg your pardon, sorry?
Is your supply chain more resilient now? As you say, you got your suppliers accredited and you've learned a lot of lessons from COVID.
I think by now we are very stable already, meaning that everybody know what to do. And then of course, during this COVID pandemic time, there is so much of risk, say for example, we also have to tighten up, make sure our SOPs are very tip-top as well, because we got about 500-600 workers, that not all stay in the farm. They're also factory, they also go back home and come back. So we was a bit worried about, staff get infected, for example, and then causes a factory outbreak, for example. As a result of the outbreak, for example, your plant need to shut down. So there is a lot of risk over the months, So we have to be very careful in how we manage that. So like Larkin, for example, the place I'm located now, our neighbor factory a few doors down the road, has got an outbreak, and then further down the road there's another outbreak. So it's just so much anxiety for us in the sense that we never know when we will get hit. So what we did is that we actually provide free meal for all our workers that work in the factory, and all the staff as well, the free lunch, free dinner, for example. So we just stop them from going. Don't go to warung and buy anything, because we never know when you go to warung, you get interact with other people, then you get infected, you bring back to the. So we also do a lot of social distancing, for example, in our factory, to make sure that everybody know the seriousness of this COVID disease. And then our lunch and dining table are all split by department, for example. And then ASMI even provided the prayer mat, to make sure that everyone is provided with one prayer mat. So whatever we can do with face masks and all these kind of things. So I think, but thank God, that we have gone through the period so far, so good. We don't have any outbreak in our plant.
Yeah, Loy, we've never actually met in person. I've only ever seen you on a screen, and you seem like a super nice guy, right? You seem like someone who has spent a lot of time with a young person or an old person and just try and impart some life skills to them, right? I know that one of your top people now, a guy called Jacob Madan, you hired him when he was a university student at Sabah University, and he was actually studying animal science. Now he's one of your top executives in the business, and you have a very nice and diverse management team, you, Azmi, and Jacob. And of course, a lot of the people that join you would never have thought about joining a dairy milk organization in Malaysia, of all places, right? What are some of the things that you tell them? What are the life lessons you tell them? Not just in terms of doing business, but in terms of being a person and individual as well.
Yeah, I think I'm very fortunate to have Jacob on board. Jacob is actually, as you rightly pointed out, joined me as an intern in Kota Tinggi Farm, Mawai from USM. And I remember when he joined me, he was quite a weight. Yeah? And then after 6 months with Mawai Farm, he actually lose a lot of weight. And then when he go back for his convocation, everyone see Jacob losing weight, And then because of that, to be true, a lot of new interns, they're not to come to Mawai because they think that if you come to Mawai to work as intern, they will really work you wrong, So but anyway, Jacob, I think the key important thing about our dairy business is livestock. Your key people must have a genuine love for those animals. If you don't have that, I think it's going to be quite difficult. I think that's the prerequisite to me, to someone that are genuinely like the animal, someone that genuinely care for the animal. This kind of thing, I think you can't fake it. If it is there, it's there. If not there, it's not there. So I think Jacob come along very well as a young boy, and incidentally he's from Kuala Lumpur. He's a big city boy. So I was not sure whether Jacob will really works out. And then inside the jungle, our Kota Tinggi farm is like 15 kilometers from the main road. And we were very fortunate because we got 3G in our farm. Because our farm is just behind the mountain next to Kota Tinggi waterfall. So we got 3G. Imagine if you got no 3G in a farm, even the indoor boy don't want to work for you, So it works out well. So I think Jacob has come along very well because he's very intelligent as well, very intelligent and very smart. So I think over the years, I spent so much time with Jacob to personally groom him in a sense that it's more for the thinking, because as if for me, when I was when we were young, when we were a much smaller company, when I start with 60, 70, 80, I can know the cow by the name because I go to the cow farm almost every day. But as you grow, what you realize that you reach to a point that when you got 400, 500, 300, 400, 500, 600 stuff, some of the stuff you can't you don't even know their name, So I felt very, very bad sometimes, that when I interact with some of my farm staff, I can't even call them by the name, other than those senior executive or the executive that you think that you constantly communicate with them. So for Jacob, for example, I think he also manages very well in his downline because I told Jacob I cannot be possibly going to visit every farm like a daily basis or weekly basis. Some farm, I can't even be there for a few weeks. So I think that actually, in returns, I think Jacob has got quite a good EQ as well in terms of managing people. In farm, there's always a frustration time because there's so much of chores to do, so much that your tractor, your grass, your cow, everything, any section that don't move well, for example, even your tractor break down, as a result, you can't bring in the grass, your cow got no feed to eat. So everything need to be synced. And those guys that need to get up at 5 a.m. in the morning have to be punctual. So there is a problem, but I think he manages it very well, yeah.
So for business principles, okay, hard work is a given. I know I saw you talk about how sometimes you and Azmi work 15, 16 hours a day, every day, okay? I know also that you care about diversity, and it's a big quality because, as you say, the cows can't tell whether you're Malay, Chinese, or Indian, or how many hours you work. They only know that there's stuff there, right? And then, of course, there's respect and compassion for your fellow human beings and your fellow animals as well. What are the business values that you hold most dear to yourself, Loy, for other entrepreneurs that want to start business?
Yeah, but I think, as I say, that it goes back to my parents' day when they were teaching me about being honest and hold a high integrity. That is the prerequisite for you, because when you hold that value in you, you have to treat everybody very fairly. The people that are surrounding you, you have to show gratitude in terms of how they help you to build this company. Azmi and I, and we go back, almost a 20 years old friend. He's a Malay, I'm a Chinese, he's a Muslim, I'm a Christian. So it doesn't matter what is the color of your skin or what your religion you are. I think the friendship goes beyond that. It is the human to human relationship, the trust, the mutual respect. Of course, Azmi and I have bad days, we argue sometimes, we disagree, things like that. But that is work, nothing to do with our personal relationship. So I think employees in our farm, for example, now we have just completed our humane farming accreditation. Hopefully in a month or two, our farm will get accreditation from this whole organization that we are the first dairy in Asia that our farm are humanely accredited, in a sense that all the cow comfort, the cow, how we look after the calf and the whole. So we pay a lot of emphasis, not only the employees, but also our cow, because these are the ones that help us to generate our business. So in terms of employees, I think obviously you can't avoid to have some bad apple here and there, but generally I think our employees are well taken care of in terms of providing them the space. Let's say, for example, like our Muazzam farm. We have a canteen in our Muazzam. We offer subsidized food to all our employees in Muazzam. We grow our food. I talked to Jacob. I said, Jacob, we are farmers, you know. If the amount of compost fertilizer that we're able to create, and if we cannot even farm some vegetable for our own eating, then I think we're not even fit to be a farmers, you know. So what we did is that we also have one section that we grow fruits, we grow vegetable, we grow all these things, you know, that we're able to supply to our canteen. We have a lot of water reservoir pond, for example. So we raise a lot of tilapia, for example, and bring in those tilapia to the farm, to the canteen. And then as a result, the workers in the whole farm and factory can eat not only a subsidized meal at the lower cost, but also a healthier food as well. Yeah.
Yeah, but that matters, right, Lloyd? Because nowadays, you know, whether it's from a humane perspective where your animals are concerned, to treating your workers right, to having basically a circular economy on the farms itself, right? These things matter, and I know that foreign fund managers, international fund managers, local fund managers, they look at principles like ESG, environment, social, and governance. They want to know that you're doing right by your fellow human being, as well as right by your fellow shareholders and your profit targets as well, right? Does it come out in terms of the quality and some of the produce that you come out with? And I know that where it comes to pricing, this relates to some of the questions from the listeners as well. At 8 ringgit 20, you're on the higher end of the milk product range in Malaysia. And it seems as if they're still selling so well, right? Do you think this has, what you do in terms of how you run the business has a value that is manifested not just in the price of your product, but also in terms of how shareholders might see your business?
I think I'm not sure where they get the price of 820 per liter. I think if I recall correctly, our recommended selling price is actually about 730 or 750 per liter for the
Actually, that I made it up because I actually paid 820 from a shop in KL. I wanted to try. Maybe it's a special variant, but it was damn nice, by the way. Sorry for my English.
So our full cream fresh milk is going for about 7 something. As I say, it has been there for many years already. Now, I think ESG is something that we really, really pay a lot of effort in our fund, for example. I think to us, I personally feel that, you know, there's no point that if your company is doing well, you make a lot of money, you know, so what's so big deal, you know? And if you treat your people like a shit like that, you know, you treat your animals, abuse your animal, for example, things like, and then you pollute the environment with no regards to the downstream people. So I think in that sense, I think we make a lot of effort as a company to ensure that, you know, that even the company being successful, the brand is being recognized for what we are, the value that we hold to, I think is very important. So in a sense that we do not want to be seen that, you know, that our employees are not well taken care. We try our best to help them, you know, and give them the opportunity to grow with our company. And we go to rural area. I think that itself is a very, very high impact to the community, in the sense that you go to Muazzam Shah, for example, and you create 250 family jobs. And in those places, if let's say if you're a supervisor, you make 3,000-4,000 ringgit, you live very, very comfortably, as opposed to you're in KL, 3,000-4,000 ringgit, for example. So I think that in that sense, we actually create opportunities in the rural area to actually do what we need to do. Besides growing our business, our people are well taken care. Animals are not being abused, are well taken care. This is why we go for humane farming. We want other people to come and say, hey, please help me. What else do I need to improve, you know, to go for this kind of accreditation? And environmentally, for example, you all know cow poo a lot, you know, so there's a lot of manure slurry that we need to handle. So what we did is that we invested on decanter to actually take out the solid from the slurry. And then the water, we invest millions and millions of ringgit to run our irrigation pipe to all across the few hundred acres farmland to make sure that we irrigate our grass with all those manure water coming out from our dairy. So not only you nourish the soil, the grass also grow well as well. So, and all the solid that we have, I think we're soon going to be one of the biggest touching worm breeder in Malaysia, because the amount of charging that we actually raise to make sure that, you know, we give them all the cow manure, for example, to feed on them, and they in return convert to a worm casting, which is very, very good, probably the best organic fertilizer you can find, and we deposit it back to the soil. Yeah.
it sounds like you run a tip-top operation in all your farms, and obviously you do enjoy premium pricing to some degree. Would you consider going? And this is a question from Yokiat saying, would you consider going into producing evaporated and condensed milk to use the lower quality or less fresh milk sourced from farmers, just to maybe broaden the product range a bit? Do you think?
That one I think is not likely, because when you wanted to go to the, say for example, the milk powder category or the condensed milk category, usually this is happening in the country that when you produce the most fresh milk at the most economic price. So in other words, the transportation cost of the subsequent finished product is no longer an issue. For example, in New Zealand, for example, you cannot ship fresh milk out because the freight cost would kill you. It's so expensive, and you have all this container imbalance, for example. So they have to make sure that evaporated become a powder, for example, in order for them to ship to the many parts of the world. So you can't do that. So anything that you think of to concentrate it, just like the way you did to the powder, it has to be done in the source whereby you have abundance of raw milk at a very, very low price. And then usually, like Australia and New Zealand, sometimes we call it the seasonal flush, yeah, because it's seasonal cowing. So when we have a seasonal flush, what happens is that during that period, all those equipments are all turned on to the maximum capacity to process whatever excess milk that you have and turn them to milk powders, or you turn them to concentrated product.
Yeah, so Malaysia is your core market, right? And I want to ask another question from Andrew Yao, because in your core market, you've got a Malaysian government target of self-sufficiency for dairy by 2025. Okay, is that filled organically? And how much of that is actually accelerated by import tax on dairy products? Again, this is just in industry insights that not many people might know.
I think the governments are very actively looking at fulfilling our SSL. And I think you all have to get it right, because when we say that we met our SSL, for example, it is not the total dairy industry, meaning that we are not referring to milk powder, we're not referring to butters, we're not referring to cheese, for example. The government only referred to the fresh milk category, the chilled fresh milk category. So that one, I think at the moment, we're probably looking at about 60–70% self-sufficient. And the government, through this intake, we call it the field dairy valley that they wanted to develop in the coming years. Hopefully that one, I think in about their target, maybe in about 4 or 5 years, they wanted to fill up the gap. Yeah.
Okay. Can I just ask, because one of our listeners, Chong Hua Hong, has asked this a couple of times, and I think this is an interesting question, right? Government agencies, media competitors claim that Malaysia's fresh milk consumption per capita is low due to high prices, right? And that many have responded with lower prices for their powder milk. But your prices are higher and you sell quite well, right? So can you please reconcile these contradicting observations?
I'm not sure, the definition of high price here. So as I say that, you cannot compare our fresh milk price in our country with, say, Australia, whereby Khoo selling it for $1 Aussie, or you go to UK, for whatever price down there. So I think it's not really a fair comparison, because the cost structure here are different. The cow produce a lot lesser. So in that sense, when you're talking about being fresh, it's a bit of cost that you have to be involved. Today, if let's say if you are looking at, for example, even our competitor milk powder price, historically they have been selling about 5–6 ringgit, 6–7 ringgit has always been there, but it's milk powder and nobody complained, right? For example, so I'm not sure the definition in terms of high milk price, as in some of these economists or research, they compare with US or with Australia. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, certainly on the McDonald's Big Mac index, when you translate everything back to US dollar, it does seem comparable, Loy. I want to go back to something that you touched on earlier, but you didn't really expand on. And this is something which is it's actually quite tectonic from a post-COVID perspective, because you talked about how in-house consumption, basically domestic consumption, has gone through the roof. And that has really replaced to more than you expected levels the fact that people are not going to hypermarkets or supermarkets to buy milk anymore, and you have a home delivery system which has been built up in recent history. How big of a market is that? And basically, have consumption patterns changed? Are people not going to supermarkets anymore? Is that thing here to stay?
Now, I think this is something that the COVID really changed the landscape, no doubt about that. And chances is that, many sectors could have been, I don't know, maybe even could be permanent, people that having the behavior of shopping online and have the convenience of things being delivered. So what we realized that I think the one thing that we actually developed out of our business that we probably, me and Azmi, the most proud of is our home dealer system, our stockist system, our home dealer system. At the end of the day, I think in business, I think is you look at it this way. The company can do very well. You can make a lot of money, fine, But then the next question is that, do you also along the way within your mean that are you also enriching somebody else as well or not, your communities around you, the people around you and things like that. So I think what that really comes out of our home dealer distribution system that really serves us well even during the COVID time, in particular during the COVID time, it was something that 4 years ago, Azmi and I, we actually developed the home dealer system. And the idea was then is quite simple, is to offer a housewife a part-time job to become our dealers, to sell some of our milk to your neighborhood, to your communities around you, and then make some money as a supplemental income. And little did we expect that it actually grown to this size, in that sense, over the last 4 years. So the first 2 years, is a bit slow because we were very much a pasteurized, fresh category milk company, meaning that all the cold chain need to be preserved and things like that. So the movement of delivery has to be very, very calibrated in the sense that if you have a cold chain breakdown, then what will happen is that the customer ended up buying a milk that is bad. So we were quite concerned about it. So in that sense, the first 1 or 2 years, the growth was quite measured in the sense that we were quite careful. And then 2 years ago, when we moved into the UHG, the ambient category, for example, and that was a game changer because we are able to reach out a very, very wide penetration. And it's a lot easier for our home dealer to say, you just put in your car, you don't need common box and things like that. And then that's how it grows. So today, I think it has turned out to be a very, very big portion of our distribution channel. It's contributing about 1/3 of our business. And we got almost 2,000 machi and all this is, some of them are part-time and a lot of them are going full. So here you are, Chuan. I see, if you're in a small town like Rembao or you're in Dungun, for example, you get the additional $1,000 income as extra household disposal income. It is a big money for these people outskirts, So I think that is something that we are very, very proud of today. That we can see that that we are impacting somebody else's life. We're impacting our community in such a way that they are able to generate their own income. So I remember in the early days, I see some of the Facebook posting. Some mother was posting some nice shoe and nice bag for back to school, balik sekolah, and then you say, "Mommy, able to get this season, with jual susu and things like that." So I think that is also important in the sense that how we also along our value chain, how we also enrich other people by providing them the opportunity. So as I say that in this sense, we are actually by giving them, we're actually better off. They actually return us more. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a big thing that you're doing, Loy, and I think a lot of people will be grateful to you for doing that. I don't know how much time we got. I think we've got about 10 minutes left. So let's talk about growth, okay? Let's talk about the future. And according to the news reports, you had 2019 revenue of about $250 million ringgit. That's with a B, not an M. You employ nearly 600 people and local market share of about 40%, right? So what is your thinking in terms of the next leg of growth? Assuming that from some occasion or circumstance, suddenly came into a pile of capital.
Yeah, I think that is something we still think that dairy industries are very capital intensive. To set up a farm, say for example, even typing context, to put out a processing plant easily will cost 50, 60 million, and as I said, these are the things that are relatively capital intensive. The the just to I think the last 3-4 years we have been growing at a very strong rate, very strong rate. Like I think the figures that you have, I think referring to our 2019 numbers, then 2020, as I say that we probably grow another 60-70% and things like that. So it's a very steroid kind of a growth. I'm not sure whether we can keep that momentum or not, but as I say, that historically our growth has always been very strong. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, 60 or 70% in basically 2 years is actually bionic and steroid, as you say. So for the bean counters out there, Lloyd, one of the questions that has come in is how many hundreds of cartons or thousands of cartons of milk do you sell per day?
Well, I think honestly, I don't have that. We many, many. So I don't really measure that in the cartons or in bottle or in pack, but it's quite a fair bit. It's quite a fair bit. So I think that is where we are continuing to add our line, and typing will have our new production line as well. So at the moment, can you imagine the guy in Kedah enjoying a bottle of fresh milk is sent from Johor or sent from Muazzam, Pahang? So once typing is up and running, say by end of the year or early next year, then in northern market, all the fresh milk will be serviced by our farm in Taiping, going up north to Thailand, to Penang and Ipoh and all this. That will be managed by our northern farmers.
Okay, so market expansion will really be domestic for now, and you try to build market share from 40%, 50, 60, 70%. Is that the strategy right now?
We hope so. But then again, you see, here, I think this is a $1 million question. So when you think about market size in that sense, it is not just about taking competitor apple to apple comparison, that kind of market, but we also view that for some reason, for these 30, 50 years, the amount of advertisement that people wanted the milk powder. The people, some very learned mother are still feeding the milk powder to their kids. To me, it's packed with sugars. It's really not a good product. But the advertisements and all this, I'll tell you that this is fortified with DHA la, the D la, the E la, whatever you want to call it, and it's good for your kids. But the hull is packed with sugars and create the kind of dependency of a sugar cave from your kids. They're craving for it. They're addicted to the sugar. So I think there is a lot of opportunities that to educate the mother to be more learned, in the sense that if you have fresh milk that is available, you should feed fresh milk. If you go overseas, mana ada susu tepung on the supermarket shelf, all the Angmoh all grow up with the fresh milk, and look at their size, So how can fresh milk be no good for your kids? So we hope that in the coming years that the more mothers will be more learned, in the sense that after my breastfeeding, right, finish I wean off my kids from my breast milk, then I will move over to fresh milk, for example. And there is a $2 billion industry, in Malaysia. Imagine if I have two mothers converting their kids to fresh milk. There's another 400-500 million business for us to pick up, So I think the market, as to how you interpret the market size, is really depends on how do we create the opportunity that to continue to grow our company.
No, it's a good point you make, Lloyd, and that could be the reason why the Angmohs are sized like buffaloes and we're not sized like buffaloes, right? But I'm also glad you talked about health and the health attributes of milk, because health is wealth and wealth is happiness, and tomorrow is International Happiness Day. Let's end with this issue, okay? And this is a question from Tay Chi Jing. The market says that farm fresh milk is a better choice for those with lactose intolerance, asthma, autoimmune disease, allergic conditions. I think more generally, right, fresh milk, how healthy is it?
Now, You see, there's two point here. Number one, I think if you are lactose intolerant, whatever milk that you drink, probably you will not be able to handle the lactose because your bodies are lactose intolerant, right? So we have the lactose-free milk. So in fact, I think 1.5 or 2 years ago, we have launched a lactose-free milk that make from fresh milk, and that one is a very, very good option. Now, the other category of people that more often than not, people saying that, my kids or my wife been drinking the other brand for some reason, their stomach get upset, they find discomfort with their stomach and things like that. So that one, I think more often than not, some of this very minority, our cow actually are very, very heavy on A2 genetic. So you have this A1 and A2 genetic, for example, the beta casein. There are very, very small minority of people actually allergic to A1 casein protein, so causing the stomach discomfort. So in our farm, for example, I think as 6 years ago, I learned this. So the way our breeding program in our farm, all the sires are all make sure the genes are all A2 genes. So it's a bit scientific here, but anyway, generally the cow population of our farms are mostly A2. So in that sense, a lot of people realize that our milks are a lot more gentle to them because of that as well. Yeah.
But what about the health attributes, generally speaking, in terms of the protein that it brings to the body, the materials, the minerals, basically the health of the overall to the contribution to the human being?
I think God have created this milk as probably the one best form of nature that you can find, So I think for us, because I'm a dairy man, of course I'm promoting my cow's milk, yeah. But I think the truth is that sometimes when we see a lot of these advertisements going on to tell you that the high calcium the kind of thing like that, as opposed to like, let's say for example, a dairy cow, you all know that it has very balanced, you have good protein, you have good fat, it has also very high in calcium, for example. So all these other minerals are inside the calcium. It's there. It's a very wholesome, natural food for us to grow up, So I think the only thing is that somehow, due to marketing or whatever, people still say when the word fortification somehow kind of mislead you. What this one is better because it's fortified with this, with fortified. But how the fresh milk have all in there already. So when you fortify, let's say for example, for a simple discussion here today, when you say when you fortify with calcium, what do you fortify with calcium? So if you look at the label in detail, it tells you calcium carbonate. So what is calcium carbonate? Calcium carbonate, I buy from Ipoh and I feed my cow. My average cow feed about 120 grams of calcium carbonate because the cow got 4 stomach, they can absorb. So if you put that calcium carbonate into the food, do you think that your kids can ever absorb it? But because the test will tell you that anything that is carbonate, you fall under the high calcium category. So by adding that one, you can put a big label down there, it's high calcium. But can your body absorb it? No.
Loy, I'm afraid we've run out of time, but I'd just like to say, our conversation over the last 1 hour has been at once. It's been humbling, it's been entertaining, it's been insightful, it's been inspirational, and I really do wish you the best of luck in the rest of the year, because I know you're gonna have an amazing remaining 8 months. So thank you for your time, and I'd like to pass the microphone back to Ruzi Ajith of CGS-CIMB. Thank you so much, Loy. Take care of yourself.
Thank you. Yeah.
Ruzi, back to you.
Thank you, Chuang. Okay, thank you, Chuang. Looks like we're at the end of our discussion today. I would like to thank Mr. Loy for the humble and enlightening conversation with Chuang, sharing your life lessons with us, for naturally having a social impact and sustainable business for Malaysia as a whole. I would also like to thank all participants for your enthusiasm, warm engagement and support. And as Ramadan is fast approaching, I would like to wish those observing it a blessed month ahead. Also to remind you to stock up on the delicious farm fresh Cobra milk.
Thank you, Lucy.
All right, for Rebuka, We look forward to seeing you all to many more talk series to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruzi. Thank you. Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
me. Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye. Bye bye. Yeah.